Alright guys, TacticalRab here and today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. And in the wake of the crazy losers bracket run that OpTic made at their home major in Texas, from losers round 1 all the way to the grand finals up against Toronto, defeating of course Atlanta FaZe on the way for the 8th time in the last 9 times OpTic have played FaZe. Shotzzy believes he might be the crucial piece of the puzzle, saying he straight up owns these kids whenever he plays against them. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you guys are new, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, wanted to mention this from Tony Flame, absolute legend of the competitive scene. Now, he was the lead game designer at Trek for a long period of time, and as he makes a great post here on Reddit last night, saying that he's embarking on a new journey in his career, moving on from Call of Duty, and of course was crucially involved in the Black Ops games for many years. And what's great about Tony, right, I went to the Anaheim event in 2019, and I met Tony there, and I already knew like who he was at the time because he was one of the more like front-facing developers from the Treyarch side, and I was just really, you know, he was there, he was really enjoying the games, he just really loved watching his game, Black Ops 4 it was at the time, that he'd worked on so hard, being played on this very high level, and the event and the community around it. And it was so cool to see a developer like so passionate about the competitive scene as Tony Flame was. Like, legend for many reasons. Obviously he was around long before Black Ops 4 as well, but that was the one where like you know, I actually saw him there in person. So, you know, we don't see that from other developers, right? Like, how many other developers actually turn up to the Call of Duty events where their game is being played? Like, do they even know they're on? Do they actually care it exists? And just to see that from Treyarch in general was so nice. And look, Tony's going to move on to a new chapter. I'm sure that the team he's leaving behind is still going to be very strong indeed. I don't think Treyarch and their kind of focus on competitive in this stuff is going to die just because Tony Flame is moving on. But nonetheless, he's been a, you know, pretty stalwart figure from the competitive scene in some sense, and the why Treyarch, you could argue, have supported competitive as they have over the years and instilled to a degree that culture. So, you know, congrats to Tony on a phenomenal career, wishing him the best for the future. Will be dearly missed, I'm sure, by the competitive scene as well. So pretty much 1 week ago, on last Friday, there was this unbelievable day where aBeZy subbed in for Guerrillas. OpTic started their losers run with a ridiculous map 5 win. They should have probably lost map 4 as well if you guys remember that one on the Mikado. And then Mutineers upset Subliners. And then we had the Vegas versus Thieves game just to top off the absolute drama of that particular day. Now, a couple of things to mention on OpTic before we get into the Shotzzy versus FaZe stuff. Scump actually mentioned on this kind of, I think there were like some live stream thing here with Swag, and he said that he might have retired a little bit too early. Now, he's not going to come back, he says, like, it's kind of too late. I do wonder if, like, let's say OpTic had got bopped out top 12, and they were like, you know what, this isn't going to hack it, Scump, can you please come back? Maybe he'd have thought, you know what, like, let me just give it one last dance, or, you know, go to Vegas and make them a championship winning team or something, just as one final little side quest for Scump in his career. But he reckons he had more in the tank, and I think that was quite clear from Scump's. Like, he was maybe OpTic's best player before he retired. You can understand why he did it, and I think reading between the lines here, it's more like, well, you know, maybe he retired a bit too early, but that's not because he lost the, you know, it's not because he lost his ability, but it's because the games aren't so good nowadays, and that's kind of how it seems to me, right, that Scump would have kept going if the games were better over the last few years. Unfortunate as that is, but it's kind of the way that Connor's gone over the last few years. The other clip I've got to mention here is from MBoZe, right? We've seen MBoZe, of course, on a lot of the OpTic watch parties. Like, he's just a naturally hilarious guy. It's good to see him do more content, especially on the watch parties over the last few days. He's been streaming again as well and tried to make a Shotzzy play. It didn't quite work out in his favor. But someone in his lobby here actually asked him the question, like, yo, Boz, when are you going to become the SnD coach for OpTic? Like, when's it going to happen? Because Boz always known as a bit of a search and destroy mastermind, and OpTic's back-end staff is not as competitive as other teams. They've got JP, and that's pretty much it. And you can argue whether coaches are valuable or not, but surely to an extent another man in the room, another voice in the conversation in terms of search and destroy ideas, coming up with strategies, giving some constructive criticism might be valuable, even if it's only on a very rare basis it occurs. It might be good, because a lot of other teams have SnD coaches, and BoZe could be that man for OpTic, who knows?
That round's ours. Let's win another.
Yo, BoZe, I want to see you as SnD coach for OpTic, bro. Like, it's about time, you know what I'm saying?
Bombarderitas, that's what I'm thinking too. I was thinking the same shit. Nice little 100K
yeah,
salary. I'll do $125.
Search and destroy.
So OpTic made that crazy run. After the first couple of days, they played so much better for the entire rest of the week, and a lot of it I thought was led by Dashy, to be honest. I thought this is pretty remarkable stats because this season, before he was dropped from the team, his numbers weren't particularly good. He had a 1.02 overall, a straight 1-0 flat in Search and Destroy, 3 and 4 series records. Since then, their series record is 13 and 7. He's got a 1.1 overall with a 1.31 in Search and Destroy. That's pretty impressive stuff. Now, of course, Shotzzy's been a key part of their turnaround as well. You can argue Ghosty has enabled a fair bit of that. And last night, they revealed the unfiltered comms video. Now, this, I imagine, got demonetized immediately by YouTube because there's quite a few powerful words in this one, let's say. So I'll just share the clip that I can here. What I wanted to dial in on is after the FaZe series, when, of course, look, Dash even said on stream, I believe, last night that when you're saying what you're saying after you just slammed some kids, you have no idea what you're saying. You're just, speaking from pure hype and emotion at this time. So I don't know if Shotzzy will remember what he said specifically. But if you listen closely, you'll hear that Shotzzy basically says, I promise you I run these kids. As in, whenever he plays FaZe, he always has their number.
Let's go, Rainbow. Let's get it. Let's get it, Let's get it down. Let's go, Rio.
I'm trying off your front. One guy's maps. Nice. I got your color. I'm choking this. Good match. Run these kids, bro. I promise you I fucking run these kids, bro. Oh my god. You're so running, bro. You're so fucking.
That was definitely an insane tourney. I wish we could have won that tourney. That would have been lit, but it was still an insane run nonetheless. I've always wanted to have a run like that, from losers round 1 to at least a losers final, or obviously make it to a grand final. But I wanted to win that. But I'm still proud of the boys. You know what I mean?
And looking at the statistics, he does seem to be correct on this one, Shotzzy. For some reason, whenever he plays the Tiny Terrors, he just does so well against that particular duo. Now, in fairness, all the way back to Cold War, Dallas Empire were getting slammed most of the year by Atlanta FaZe. In fairness, though, that was the unbelievable Cold War Atlanta FaZe that were losing to nobody, and Crim6 always got hard countered by that FaZe team for whatever reason. So regardless of the circumstances, he just couldn't get a good result, it seemed, against the Tiny Terrors. Whereas Shotzzy individually, since going to OpTic Texas, has been a rather different story. Dashy, of course, also mentioned how he was, proud of their losers run. He was hoping they could go one step further, but to make a losers run is always exciting like that. It's pretty rare in COD history where a team goes from losers round 1 all the way to the finals at the best of times anyway, let alone wins. It's happened a couple of times. Slash has done it, of course, but still, OpTic nearly achieved it, but just fell short in the grand finals, of course. Ran out of steam, I think, a little bit, and that's usually what gets you on these long losers bracket runs. But look at the numbers here, for example. This was the FaZe series, where aBeZy and Simp have 0.89, 0.96 respectively, and Shotzzy had 101 kills, a 1.4 KD, most damage in the lobby by an absolute mile, and he was the key reason why OpTic were able to win that series, Shotzzy. And this is not a new thing for Shotzzy. Whenever he plays FaZe, for whatever reason, he just owns these guys. Now, is it a playstyle thing? Is there other factors in play? Tough to say, but it's got to be said, over the last couple of seasons, OpTic's crazy record against FaZe, which is still quite remarkable to me, really. Looking at these numbers, does almost feel like, how is this even possible? That this FaZe team that's always top 3, just somehow, whether it's a mental block or what it is against OpTic, there must be some degree of mental that goes into this, right? Because when they play OpTic, they know that they're going to be in for a hard time, and when Shotzzy plays FaZe, he knows he's going to slam them, right? Which is the other part of the puzzle here, right? That it kind of works in both ways, where OpTic play FaZe super confident they're going to beat them, regardless of how good FaZe happen to be at the present time. And Shotzzy, I'm sure, comes in hyper confident as well, because he knows that usually he has a great time against the SMG duo for whatever reason, and really just against that entire team. Maybe just his playstyle and the way that he's so tricky to deal with and finding all the gaps just seems to counter what FaZe are trying to do very well. But also, I think part of it is a confidence thing, but just the fact that FaZe have dominated. Okay, last season they didn't dominate, but they were still number 1 in the standings. They came second at 4 events last year. This year they've made 3 top 3s already and a grand finals where they won. So it does make you wonder how some of these, records are even possible, but I do think a lot of this is led by Shotzzy at times, and we'll see if that trend continues going forwards, because FaZe will have to think about, it's the same way that all the other teams looking at FaZe with their dominant search and destroy will analyze FaZe's search, will analyze, okay, how are they doing this, how are they doing that? So FaZe's S&D record, which is right now 95%, is going to drop down to probably 70, 75. I don't think they're going to have much better chances than that as the season progresses. They're unreal in search, but other teams are going to look at what they do, try and counter them. And the same way, FaZe are going to have to look at this result and say, you know what, we've got to find a way to stop OpTic or to stop Shotzzy. But every time they try, it doesn't seem to work out in their favor, right? The funny thing as well, I might share this clip for you guys at the end of the video, where Cellium and the Thanos, right, Slasher apparently rocked up to the strip club to try and recover from their OpTic loss. So I guess that's what happens when Shotzzy just smokes you on main stage. Gotta try and regain somehow. I'll share that at the end of the video. Before we get there, they wanted to share some lineman cards here from the stages. This is actually kind of crazy to me because you guys might remember when Los Angeles Guerrillas first formed this roster with Hicksy and JoeDeceives, they actually were pretty damn good at hardpoint. They were competitive with most teams. Then they took a couple off FaZe maybe, but they were losing their search and destroys. And we thought, okay, their search is going to get better. This team could be quite competitive. Turns out, though, not the case. 2-11 in hardpoint this stage. That is tragic. 6-5 in search and destroy, 5-2 in control. But that's the thing. If you're terrible in hardpoints, you're going to get bodied usually because there's 2 of them in a series. And arguably, that's the most important mode. Tough to say, really, what the most important mode is. But if you're good at hardpoint, you can win 3-1. Whereas if you're good at search and destroy, you have to win 3-2. I don't know. Maybe that logic doesn't really check out. But still, they're bad at hardpoint. It costs them a lot. Arcitys individually had a horrible stage. His numbers here, like, okay, the way these numbers work on the cards is it looks at, based on the particular player's role, it looks at these numbers at the bottom here. So basically, if I zoom into Assault, you guys can see these numbers on the kills per 10 minutes. So in Control, he has a 95 rated kills per 10 minute stat and 97 rated death per 10 minutes. So what that does is it looks at all the ARs in his category because he's an AR player, and it ranks him out of, let's say there's 24 ARs and they're considering 2 ARs, 2 SMGs here, which is maybe what Lion does. He's one of the very best. So the very best gets a 99 in this particular category, the number 1 in that category out of all that particular role, and the worst gets a 50. And therefore, based on like your range between those numbers, you therefore get a number like this. And then there's a calculation that is done between all of these numbers in the corners that are then tallied up. So I believe they take the 2 top numbers from each mode. So for example, over in hardpoint, they'll take 66, 74, and then they'll take like 87, 85, 95, 97, and then divide all those numbers added together by 6, and then you get your overall number here. So I think that's what happens there, which is why Arcitys kind of gets fried because his numbers here are pretty much terrible. In Control, for example, despite them being pretty good, he has a 0.78, has the lowest kills per 10 minutes in his role in the league, has the lowest damage per 10 minutes in his role. So tough stage for Arcitys, and it's got to be said that if a change is here to be made, like, you're not dropping Assault right now. That's just how it is. So I guess we'll see how it goes going forward. Same story here for the Florida Mutineers. All of these guys very similar rated actually, and Havoc, as we say, right, his numbers are pretty low, but largely because he's a bit of a slower player SMG. He's more of like a, you know, route heavy guy, flanker guy, and therefore his kills per 10 minutes stats aren't going to be so high. Damage per 10 minutes also pretty low, and therefore, like, when you add up the numbers, he gets a pretty low overall number, and of course loses a few points based on them having a losing record, which is how the card also goes. But yeah, Florida lowest across the board, but they did get a good upset victory. But it's their search that's fallen off right there. Hardpoint now is passable, as is their Control, but their search on the previous roster was great because they made Maniac. Now they don't have him, like, they're almost going to lose more often. So it does feel like they managed to get better, but also somehow worse simultaneously. So very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Hey, you know where MC was, Sunday night?
Where, bro? Strip club? Is that a good guess or what? I think
Yeah, that's a great guess.
No, it's wrong. It's wrong.
Yeah, MC at the strip club Sunday night, bro. No way.
Tom, hey, Tom, I was with Thanos, bro.
Yo, I
was with Thanos.
No, said Thanos was getting twerked on like
Thanos was there too. Thanos, my boy Thanos.
Bro, one more hot tub.
Yo, no way, bro. I gotta talk to Thanos, bro. What the fuck?
Twerked on my job, bro. Shirt off.
Thanos, my brother Thanos, man.